Hello and welcome to World Talks here on TVP World. My name is Diana Skaya. Brussels has approved a 90 billion euro loan for Ukraine while also advancing its 20th sanctions package against Russia. The funding comes as Kyiv seeks rapid disbursement to bolster its army and domestic arms production, all while EU leaders gather in Cyprus. I'm joined by Tomasz Zając, analyst, Polish Institute of International Affairs, to discuss the latest developments. Tomasz, thanks so much for being with us here on TVP World. So, Tomasz, first I want to ask you, what are some of the key takeaways coming out of this meeting in Cyprus with EU leaders, particularly in support for Ukraine? And of course, let's not close our eyes towards the situation in the Middle East with the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz.
So first of all, obviously, I think it's the loan to Ukraine, and this is really long overdue. And Hungary was blocking this this loan for internal national reason. And the pretext, I think, was the Druzhba pipeline. But I think in reality, everybody knew that this is something that Orban did to look better during the political campaign, during the recent elections in Hungary. And this was really playing with fire because Ukraine is really in need of money. And this was really the question of whether Ukraine will have money to exist almost, as a state. So this was, like I said, really long overdue. And I think a big sigh of relief might have been heard in European capitals. And same, I think, goes for the sanctions package, because this was somehow linked or also to this Hungarian veto, and also because of the fact that the oil flew through the Druzhba pipeline recently. Orban decided, because he's still the caretaker prime minister, but I think the fact that he lost the elections and he feels that the Hungarian citizens want different kind of approach to Ukraine. So he also lifted his veto for the 20th sanction package. So I think regarding Ukraine, those two issues are the most important. But we can witness change in the tone towards Ukraine from the future prime minister. Of course, I don't think we should wait. We should wish for a big overhaul of the approach towards Ukraine in Hungary. So I wouldn't expect a big revolution towards this. But still, I think some things will change. For instance, Hungary was also blocking the so-called clusters, so chapters of negotiations in accession process for Ukraine, and also for political reasons. There was no technical or merit-based reasons for blocking this, but nevertheless, Orban was doing that, and I think Magyar won't follow in his footsteps. So that's also something we could wait for. So the fact that the negotiations with Ukraine will go on.
Let me ask you this, Tomasz. I just want to go back for a moment to this 90 billion euro package. How exactly will the funds be allocated? How is Ukraine planning on to spend it? I mean, are we talking military support, humanitarian, boosting Ukraine's own defense production? How is exactly this going to be allocated? And also, most importantly, when can Ukraine begin to see this money coming in?
So to be perfectly honest, I don't know the exact allocation of those funds, but I think what is important here is I already underlined how important it was to have this money quickly. And actually, because of the lack of this loan, European member states, some of them at least, they had to actually support Ukraine with their own money. So, answering your questions when they will see it, probably not, tomorrow, not next week. This is a long process. But in the meantime, what is important is the survival of the, Ukrainian statehood. And this country, due to the Russian invasion, they need so much money, and they cannot really function only on their own, meaning, from the tax revenues or something like this. So it's true that they are dependent on the external funds, and because of this, those European member states that I've mentioned, they decided, to in a way chip in to just make Ukraine afloat. So again, in the meantime, the funding is secured, and I think everybody was expecting this, the fact that the loan will be eventually delivered, and this will happen, in the foreseeable future.
Tomasz, let me ask you, the 20th sanctions, the new 20th sanctions package on Russia, how much is it actually going to be able to constrain Russia's ability to sustain the war?
Well, that's a bigger issue, regarding how efficient the sanctions are. I think we are at the stage right now when the new sanctions, it's like this game of whack-a-mole, when you try to with a hammer to just make like a move for one mole, and then another one pops in from another hole. And this is exactly what is happening with the sanctions on Russia. EU is coming up with some ideas how to stop the funding for Russia from different areas, and then Russia is coming up with the idea how to circumvent it. The classic case is the shadow fleet. So when we try to get rid of the Russian fuels, then they come up with the idea of the ships that are theoretically stateless or doesn't belong to Russia, and they still sell Russia's oil. But answering directly your question, I think the sanctions are relatively efficient, meaning that obviously they were never meant to stop the war, because it's impossible. Only Vladimir Putin can make this call. But the idea is actually to make the costs of the war higher for Putin and for the elite in Russia, to see that this really hurt them, that that they have to come up constantly with those new ideas how to circumvent them, and the income to their budget is, because of the sanction, is lower than it had been without them.
Tomasz, I'd like just for a moment, on exactly that note, let's just listen to a soundbite by Antonio Costa, President of the European Council.
Strengthening Ukraine forces and their capacity to continue the fight to defend from Russian invasion. The second step, to increase our pressure on Russia, to push Russia to accept seriously and to engage seriously in the peace negotiations. Now it's time to look forward and to prepare the next step. And the next step is to open the first cluster of negotiations for the Ukrainian accession to the European Union.
All right, Tomasz, just very briefly, because we're almost out of time. What do you make of what Antonio Costa said there, that to open the first cluster of negotiations for Ukrainian accession to the European Union?
So I already alluded to that, and the negotiations with Ukraine, they were really almost ready. And actually, because everybody in the European Union knew that Hungary is blocking this for political reasons, on technical levels, actually, from what I know, the negotiations were going on. So, and now the thing is, we could officially unlock, so to speak, those negotiations. And thanks to that, Ukraine can, go forward in those negotiations, because they really put a lot of effort, actually, to fulfill all those criteria, to apply the European law to their country, etc. So I think this is obviously, the consequences of the change of the government in Hungary, and this was expected. We could have expected this to happen, but generally, I think it's good news that we can now see that Ukraine, finally, that the accession process will be merit-based, as it was meant to be, and it won't be a hostage as it was with Hungary. It was used as a hostage, with other issues on the table.
Thank you so much, Tomasz Zając, for all your input with us here on World Talks.
Thank you very much.
And that's all for this episode of World Talks here on TVP World. I'm Diana Skaya. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.